Ever think about, those lives, like right in the middle of like huge historical events,
Yeah.
people whose stories get all tangled up with like world-changing stuff?
Yeah.
Well, today we're going to like dive deep into one of those lives.
Okay.
The story of Sarah Forbes Bonetta.
Interesting.
So imagine this. You got this young girl taken from her home in West Africa,
Okay.
forced into the Atlantic slave trade.
Wow.
And then, get this, she becomes the goddaughter of Queen Victoria.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So many twists and turns.
Yeah.
It's like a window into, Victorian Britain.
Yeah.
They were all about ending slavery, right?
Right.
But at the same time, they were still so into colonialism and like all the racial biases that came with it.
It's a real paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sarah's story helps us understand that era so much better. It's not just a biography, it's like a key.
Yeah, yeah.
It unlocks all these deeper understandings of like that whole time period.
Right, yeah.
Through what she went through, we can really look at this clash between a country that was so proud of, being enlightened.
Right.
But at the same time, they were, holding on to systems that were denying people basic human rights.
Just because of their skin color.
Exactly.
It's really something to think about. How could one person's life be so affected by and then like shed light on such huge historical forces?
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to try to unpack today.
Absolutely.
So to get started, we got to go back to the beginning,
Okay.
like the very beginning. The events that kind of set her life on this crazy path.
And it's a rough beginning, right?
It is.
A slave raid in 1848, her village destroyed by the Dahomey army, loses her family. It's like a real slap in the face about how brutal things were back then.
Absolutely. And to really get it, understand Sarah's early life, you have to understand the Dahomey Kingdom.
Okay.
They were like a major power in West Africa,
Powerful.
known for being strong militarily.
Hmm.
They even had, get this, an all-female warrior unit.
Wait, what? An all-female army?
Yeah, they were called the Amazons.
That's incredible. I had no idea.
They were seriously skilled and like super disciplined.
Wow.
But here's the thing, this powerful kingdom was also really deep into the Atlantic slave trade. It
Right.
was a big part of their economy.
Hmm.
And well, it led to what happened to Sarah's village.
Right, right.
And on top of all that, the Dahomey also had these really messed up customs.
Right.
Like every year, they'd have these rituals with human sacrifice.
So we're talking about a society with values that are just completely different from what we would consider civilized today.
Totally.
Sarah's journey wasn't just going from one country to another. It was like stepping into a whole other world
Exactly.
with different power structures, different beliefs.
Yeah.
A world where she was constantly being judged by, European standards.
And right in the middle of all this, you have a British naval officer show up,
Okay.
Captain Frederick E. Forbes. He came on a mission to, well, at least officially, try to stop the slave trade.
And this is where things take that crazy turn for Sarah, right?
Yeah.
She's given to Captain Forbes as a gift from King Gazo.
The ruler of Dahomey.
Right, and this gift was meant for Queen Victoria. Can you imagine a human being given as a gift? It's just, I don't even know what to say to that.
It's really disturbing. It
Yeah.
shows you just how dehumanizing people's attitudes were towards anyone of African descent.
And even Forbes, right? I mean, he was against slavery.
He was, but his motives were complicated. He was definitely interested in Sarah,
Okay.
but he was also looking at her as a way to test those racist theories going around.
So even the people who were considered, quote-unquote, progressive back then were still caught up in racial bias.
Absolutely.
Makes you think how deeply ingrained those ideas were.
Yeah, Forbes wanted to prove that Africans weren't intellectually inferior,
Right.
but him taking Sarah as a gift, it just reinforced the power dynamics of colonialism.
And
It's like a perfect example of how contradictory that time period was.
Yeah. And then Sarah arrives in England, this young girl who's already gone through so much trauma,
Right.
but she learns English quickly.
Yeah, she really impressed Queen Victoria with how smart she was.
And how adaptable she was.
Yeah, Victoria was so impressed she decided to become Sarah's godmother.
Wow.
There are even things Victoria wrote in her diary about Sarah and the gifts she gave her.
From a war-torn village to the royal court,
Yeah.
it must have been absolutely mind-blowing for her.
Yeah, it's a wild story, but of course there's that dark side to it all.
Right. And I imagine being in that elite circle, while it opened doors for her, it also made her a symbol.
Mm-hmm.
People probably just saw her through the lens of all those racial stereotypes of the time.
Oh, for sure. You can see that with her education.
Okay.
She ended up going to schools in Sierra Leone, which was a British colony at the time,
Right.
and then back to England.
It's interesting, though, through all of this, we don't really hear Sarah's own voice.
That's true.
Everything we know about her is from what other people wrote.
Yeah.
It shows how little agency she had. And that becomes a big theme in her story.
Exactly. You can really see that lack of agency when we look at her marriage.
Right. Her arranged marriage to James Pinson Labiolo Davies.
A successful Yoruba businessman.
It shows that no matter what your background was, societal expectations for women, especially women of color in positions like Sarah's, were incredibly limiting.
No doubt. And even the way the newspapers wrote about their wedding, they focused so much on the civilizing influences supposedly at play.
Right.
It was a big spectacle.
Yeah.
10 horse-drawn carriages,
Wow.
16 bridesmaids.
That's a lot.
But the story the press was telling, it was very deliberate. It was meant to reinforce certain ideas about race and empire.
There's actually an article from back then that calls Sarah a supposed African chieftain's daughter who was presented to Captain Forbes.
Wow.
The way they use language, it says so much about the power dynamics at play.
Yeah, it really does.
So you have this young woman married off with the Queen's blessing,
Yeah.
living this seemingly privileged life.
Right.
But you can't help but wonder what was going through her mind,
Yeah.
what she was really feeling through it all.
What was her internal experience compared to all this external noise?
Exactly.
That's a question that really sticks with you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it just reminds us that even when we have a lot of information about historical events, there are always hidden stories, perspectives we've lost to time.
It's like there are always more pieces to the puzzle.
Always.
Yeah, it's almost like, she's living this double life.
Right.
Outwardly, she's doing everything Victorian society expects of her.
Uh-huh.
But inside, who knows what she's going through, what she's really thinking.
It makes you realize how tricky it can be to understand history,
Yeah.
especially when we're talking about someone whose voice wasn't really heard.
Right.
We can't just impose our own ideas on Sarah's experiences.
No, we have to be careful.
We need to look at what we can learn from the few things we have
Right, from the sources.
and acknowledge that there are gaps, things we just don't know.
Okay, so let's dig into those later years. What happened after the marriage?
Okay.
Did the Queen, stay involved in her life?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Sarah and James had 3 kids.
Okay.
And Queen Victoria, she became the godmother to their oldest daughter.
Who was also named Victoria.
Yeah, exactly. And for the christening, the Queen sent this really fancy gift.
Okay.
A gold cup, a silver tea set, and a tray, all engraved with Victoria Davies from her godmother, Victoria, Queen of Great Britain and Ireland.
Now that's a gift. So it sounds like, at least from the outside, Sarah achieved a level of, security, status, something she could never have imagined growing up.
Yeah, well,
As a butt coming, I could feel it.
The 1870s were tough on Sarah and her family. Her health started going downhill.
Okay.
And James's businesses, they weren't doing so well. Money got tight.
It just goes to show, even with a queen looking out for you, life in Victorian times was full of uncertainty.
Definitely.
No matter how high you climbed, there were still these harsh realities.
Exactly. Sarah got tuberculosis, which was, really common back then and often deadly.
Right.
And James, even though he had been successful, ended up in a lot of debt.
It's so different from the image we have of people connected to royalty, all that privilege.
Yeah.
It makes Sarah seem real human. She wasn't just some historical figure. She was a woman facing real problems, problems we can all relate to.
Yeah. And sadly, Sarah's story ends way too soon. They tried to help her get better, sent her to Madeira, an island with a better climate.
Off the coast of Portugal, right?
Yeah. But it was too late. She died in 1880. She was only 37.
That's so sad. She went through so much, overcame so many obstacles.
Yeah.
And then to be taken so young makes you wonder, what could have been, what stories she could have told, what she could have accomplished if she'd had more time.
It's even more poignant because we don't have a lot from Sarah herself. We see her through other people's letters, diaries.
Right, it's all secondhand.
Her own thoughts, feelings, they're mostly a mystery.
It's like this strange paradox. She's famous because of Queen Victoria.
Right.
But we know more about her as a symbol than as a person.
Yeah. It makes you think about how history gets written. Who tells the stories? Whose experiences get left out?
It's a big question. So, after Sarah died, what about her family? Her daughter, Victoria, the Queen's goddaughter. Does that connection continue?
It did. Queen Victoria gave Victoria Davies like a yearly allowance.
Okay.
Made sure she was taken care of.
It's a small gesture, but it shows how complicated the relationships were in Sarah's life.
Yeah.
And those relationships kept affecting her family even after she was gone.
Even in the midst of tragedy, there can be these moments of hope, continuity. But Sarah's legacy, it goes way beyond her immediate family. One of her descendants had a huge impact on the world.
Wow, really? This is getting more and more interesting. Tell me about this descendant. What makes their story so remarkable?
Her great-great-granddaughter, Dr. Ameo Ededevo.
Okay.
Talk about a powerful story of family legacy. It's amazing how one life can have these ripple effects across generations.
From a young girl enslaved in Africa to a descendant who becomes a medical hero. It's incredible. It's like Sarah's story comes full circle with Dr. Ededevo.
Yeah, it really does. And it shows the resilience, the strength that runs through Sarah's family. So Dr. Ededevo was a doctor in Nigeria.
Yeah.
She played a key role in stopping the 2014 Ebola outbreak there.
Wow, that's amazing.
She was working at a hospital in Lagos when this businessman from Liberia came in. He had Ebola symptoms.
Oh, wow.
People were putting pressure on her to release him.
I can imagine.
But she knew how serious it was.
Yeah.
She insisted on keeping him quarantined, even though it was dangerous for her.
She must have been incredibly brave to do that, especially with so little known about Ebola back then.
It was a huge risk. And tragically, she caught the virus and died.
Oh, no, that's awful. But it sounds like her actions stopped it from spreading even more.
They did. Her quick thinking, her dedication to public health, they saved so many lives.
Amazing.
A few months later, the World Health Organization said Nigeria was Ebola-free. A big part of that was thanks to her.
It's a powerful legacy. To think that a descendant of someone who was enslaved would go on to save so many lives as a doctor, it really brings everything full circle.
It really does. It's proof of how strong the human spirit is. Even in the worst times in history, there's resilience, courage, hope. And those things connect us across generations.
Wow, it's amazing to think about how one life can have these ripple effects that go on for generations.
Yeah.
We've gone from Sarah's dramatic early life to the complexities of her time in England, and now this connection to her great-great-granddaughter, a true hero. It's a lot to take in.
It really is. And I think that's what's so great about exploring history like this.
Yeah.
It challenges us, to face these uncomfortable truths about the past, but also to celebrate the strength of the human spirit and see how connected we all are.
It's like we've been putting together a puzzle, one that spans continents and centuries.
Right.
And through that, we've uncovered not just one story, but all these different experiences
Yeah.
that shed light on race, empire, individual agency. It's complex.
Sarah's story reminds us that history is more than just dates and events.
It's about people.
It's about real people going through extraordinary things.
Right.
And their experiences, even when we only have fragments, they can still impact us today.
It encourages us to keep digging deeper, keep asking questions, and keep challenging what we think we know.
Exactly.
It also shows how important individual lives are,
Yeah.
even within the grand scheme of history.
One person's choices, struggles, triumphs, they can have an impact that lasts for centuries.
Absolutely. And Sarah's story really makes us think about the effects of colonialism and the fight for equality, which is still going on today. It's not just some historical event. It's a story that speaks to us now about identity, representation, social justice.
It really does.
This has been such a thought-provoking journey. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Sarah Forbes Bonetta's amazing life,
Yeah.
what stands out to you the most? What will you take away from all this?
For me, it's how strong the human spirit can be and how important it is to find those hidden stories.
Yeah.
They can change how we understand history.
They can change how we understand everything.
Sarah's story is proof that even when things are really tough, when there's injustice all around, people can leave a mark that lasts.
A legacy that transcends time.
It's a story that should inspire us.
To keep learning, keep questioning, keep working towards a better world.
Absolutely.
Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this episode of The Deep Dives. I hope you found it as insightful and engaging as we did. And if you want to join us for more fascinating explorations of the past, be sure to subscribe to our show.
We've got so many more captivating deep dives waiting to be discovered.
We do. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and remember those hidden narratives. You never know what amazing connections you might find.